Morning, folks. Here I am in London on the 21st of December, just having a look at the papers and marvelling at how the Financial Times seems to have become the financial Trump. On Thursday, they announced that their person of the year was going to be Donald. And the same day, the headline was Britain's borrowing costs mount as stagflation fears haunt gilt investors, i.e. that means that the banks are getting a lot of money while the poor old people of the UK are suffering. And of course, there's no direct link between Mr. Trump and this suffering, but let's have a look. Saturday, here we are. Trump seeks 5% NATO spending rule. That's a doubling, hundreds of billions of extra money to the US military-industrial complex. So Trump is set to demand that NATO more than doubles its 2% spending target, which only 23 of its 32 members meet, to 5% of GDP. That's from two people briefed on the talks. And so here we are, the spectre of pushing more money into wars which do not help the people, but help the military-industrial complex. War is great for business. And also on the front page, we have a slightly related story in Elon Musk, friend of Trump, supporting potentially reform, the far-right party here in the UK. Earlier reports said to the tune of 100 million. And the interesting thing about this report is that, Keir Starmer's chief advisor is basically saying, we need to protect the electoral integrity by not letting this sort of stuff happen. And here's how to do it. But the way they're proposing to do it wouldn't work, basically, because Musk's companies, because he owns so much and is so influential around so much of the world, he makes 90 million in profits in the UK in the past 2 years. That's profits, 90 million. Tesla, Starlink, Twitter, it goes on and on. But let's keep going, looking at this paper. Here we have Trump's aide telling the UK who should and should not be the top diplomat. We have here the FT supporting war, perhaps more. Marines given lowdown on managing finances. This is a FT initiative. We have Trump telling the EU to buy more US oil and gas. Fascinating. This has been one of the ongoing themes the past several years. During the war against Russia, or is it Russia's war against Ukraine? Guess who suffered? Russia's gas sales to the EU. Guess who benefited most? US LNG sales to the EU. So now he's doubling down. He wants even more. Below on page 2, we're only on page 2, Musk wades into Germany's election by backing the far right there. So here's another push. Far right, read anti-woke. Not nice things like saving the climate and nature, but more money, all about the finances, which this is the Financial Times. Russia struggles to tame inflation. And then next page, look, waiting for Trump, another big Trump feature. Basically, Kiev and its European allies believe they have a chance to shape the negotiation plan of the incoming US president, who wants a swift end to the year with Russia, but they're divided on what to propose. A peace proposal, while great for the people of Europe and for the world, is possibly what they fear most because they want the money to keep flowing. War is great for business. It continues this sort of theme. The global inflation battle is stalling and diverging. They very easily put interest rates up the past few years, partly blaming those same wars that they started. And now the people are suffering what they're calling here. So this is the key sentence, in my opinion. While the climb in interest rates was largely smooth and coordinated, the cutting cycle is shaping up to be punctuated by plateaus and characterized by divergence. Central bankers are due some credit for seeing the worst of the global 21-22 inflation shock, but now matters closer to home and the uncertain and varied economic impacts of Trump too are weighing more on their minds. The job of central bankers is challenging indeed, or are they actually running all this? Now, in the opinion section, a fiscal fight is brewing in the court of Trump. And Gillian Tett is concluding here, Trump, who wants to cut corporate taxes from 21 to 15%. Think about that for a bit. So they've got a huge deficit in the US. Basically, the public finances are a mess. And he wants to cut corporate taxes by that amount. And so the looming 36 trillion question is not simply whether the plutocrats or populists will win this fight, plutocrats being, I guess, the more conservative democratic types. It is also whether the bond markets will stay calm. In other words, this week's debt ceiling skirmish could merely be a prelude to bigger battles in 2025. Expect it to get nasty, she says. And so this problem of how to deal with the current chaotic scenes around the world, it's really emblematic of a few countries' challenges, especially here in the UK. Keir Starmer, this is a story about Keir Starmer's doom loop, how to get out of it. The conclusion is rather woolly here. How do you set a vision for UK, given its fairly tiny size and the onset of 4 years of Trump? But there's a hint here. Could not just finance be the better way? Could it be better to run some sort of other type of economy? And I'm suggesting that it could. Let's go back a few pages here to potential solution. Here we have a story about how the global economy is losing 25 trillion a year, according to a biodiversity report. 25 trillions, wow. So that's about a quarter of the 100 trillion a year global GDP. The global economy is losing up to 25 trillion a year because sectors such as agriculture, energy and fishing fail to account how their actions fuel interconnected crises in nature, climate and human health. A landmark international biodiversity science policy report found. So let's think about that for a moment. So all of this stuff, measuring GDP, wanting to get growth, all of this is predicated on the fact that GDP is measured properly. And it's a fair measure of what we all want as human beings and animals and other species, plants. Yet here we have fairly solid evidence that we're damaging, to get our 100 trillion, we're damaging the world to the tune of 25 trillion every year. So that 25 trillion represents a fairly blatant opportunity. And I would suggest that while clearly Trump has a mandate for some sort of change, these are the sorts of things he should be thinking about. I'm not going to hold my breath. Doesn't seem like it's going to happen, but let's hope.